Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 111. My guest in this episode is Barbara Ann Briggs, and Barbara is a poet, an author of 2 books, and a freelance journalist, as well as a podcaster and a teacher of Transcendental Meditation, as well as being a certified consciousness advisor. And Barbara has an academic background in philosophy, so I found our conversation interesting in the sense that we were able to combine a spiritual path with a philosophical inquiry, with a personal journey, both figurative and literal, in Barbara's life. And it was a lovely conversation, and I very much appreciated having her as a guest. And I hope you enjoy the conversation as well. And thank you for being here. I'd like to welcome Barbara Ann Briggs to the IdeaCast interview series. I'm looking forward to a conversation that will contain ideas and thoughts that I find fascinating about the human experience and our journeys, both physically, spiritually, and emotionally as human beings. So, Barbara, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. I I'm thrilled to be able to speak to you about ideas which actually resonate very deeply with my own search that I've been on and my own path that I've been on for my whole life. So my journey began in New York City, in Manhattan, many years ago. I was born into an interracial family. My mother's actually from Vienna, Austria, and my father's from New Orleans. So it was quite an interesting match. And I once asked my mother why she married my husband, who was so different, and she said, "Because you were meant to be born." So I thought that
Good
I thought I
answer.
couldn't really have gotten a better answer than that.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
I was searching for the true meaning of life from a very young age. I was a very introverted child. I spent a lot of time alone, and I felt from a young age that I wasn't really part of the American culture. Actually, I felt I was a stranger in a strange world. I didn't really identify with the social problems, the social divisions, which were very rampant in America and which are still prevalent in American society today. I never identified with any group, with any classification. And I found that in America, people were labeled quite a bit depending on their outward appearance. They were given a certain political label, and I never fit into any of those labels. So I spent a lot of time alone. I wasn't part of any group. And this gave me a lot of time to reflect about what the meaning of life really was. And I decided to major in philosophy when I entered New York University because I wanted to understand the eternal questions of life. What is the meaning of life? Why am I here? Is there a deeper significance to the human experience? And if there is, I want to find it. At that time, I was reading The Phenomena of Man by Teilhard de Chardin. I was reading Krishnamurti. I was reading Khalil Gibran. I was reading books which spoke about a deeper meaning of life. And I felt that my life would be dedicated to the discovery of that knowledge. I went to I didn't know much about meditation or anything, but while I was at New York University, a saint did come to the school, and his name was Sri Chinmoy, and he came to the auditorium. We were all seated in the auditorium, and he just went up to the stage and he sat there. He didn't speak a word, actually. He just sat in complete silence. And we sat there and we didn't know what to expect. At the end of about an hour, he said, would anyone like to come and join him on the stage? So some of us, including me, I went up to the stage and I sat with him in silence. And that was the meeting. It was a meeting in silence. So later, he invited whoever wanted to go to a meeting at someone's house in Queens or someplace like that. I did attend the meeting, and at the meeting, a group of people were sitting and staring at the photo of this saint. I felt that there was some very special aura about him. I did feel a deep, peaceful feeling when I sat on the stage with him, but I felt that it wasn't really my path, that it wasn't really what I was meant to do in my life. So I didn't pursue that. I didn't go to any more meetings after that. And later, when I finished my degree, also, when I was at New York University, I met someone who had a great influence on my life. This person was from Morocco. He was actually a rabbi, but he'd given all his religious orders up to pursue art. He
Mhm.
was a great poet, and he was also a great painter, and his life had become dedicated to the arts. And we became very close friends. He was a very highly evolved person, and he inspired me to write poetry. We shared our poems, and he was really a very spiritual person.
Mhm.
And that friendship did make a deep impression on my life. And later I left America. I wanted to leave America from a young age because I didn't feel comfortable with the culture. And I did go to study in England. I enrolled as a full-time dancing student at the London School of Contemporary Dance. I wanted to study philosophy, but the school that I applied to for my PhD didn't really have the course that I wanted, and I was determined to leave America. So I auditioned for a dancing school in New York, and I was accepted. And I that was my trip to London. But
Mhm.
that was my way to leave the culture that I didn't feel comfortable in. So I enrolled as a full-time dancing student, and actually I was reading a book by Uspensky. I was reading In Search of the Miraculous by Uspensky, and in the book he spoke about experiencing the deeper levels of sound. And when I read that, I went to speak to my music teacher, my percussion teacher, and I said, "How can I experience this? This is very fascinating. I want to experience this." And he said, "You should go to a lecture on transcendental meditation." And that's how I was introduced to transcendental meditation by my music teacher in London. And I did attend the lecture, and I didn't know what it was all about, but the teacher who was giving the lecture really emphasized the scientific research that had been done on the transcendental meditation technique. And he spoke about the faster reaction time, the mind body coordination, and all these types of things. And because I was studying dance as a full time student at that time, I thought, oh, this will make me a better dancer. I should be able to learn the choreography much more quickly. So I did it. I did enroll. I did learn to meditate, and it was only later that I discovered that it really was a spiritual path, and there was a deep knowledge underpinning this practice, and it came from a very ancient tradition of knowledge, the Vedic tradition. And the guru, whose picture you see behind me, Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, was a very learned saint and a very great and revered saint in all of India and also in the West. So I later found this out after I'd already learned the practice. And that's how I embarked on my spiritual journey. I learned meditation in England, and a few years later, I became a teacher of transcendental meditation.
It's funny where we pick up these trajectory altering um, influences or systems that show up for us. And I appreciate that story that you were ostensibly taking a class for music and its impact, and then you were exposed to something, and that again moved you in a new vector or direction or whatever. I want to go back maybe. There's a lot I want to ask you about what you were just saying. And so let's start chronologically. When you were younger and under the house of your parents or under the roof of your parents, Were there any seeds planted in the way of spiritual practices or discussions relating to transcendence or relation with things beyond the physical world? Was there any of that influence that you think may have?
No, I just grew up. I only grew up with my mother. My mother and
Hmm.
my mother and father separated when I was about 5 years old.
Hmm.
So I just grew up with my mother, and she was very devoted to giving us the full spectrum of our heritage.
Okay.
My mother was actually from a Jewish family in Vienna,
Hmm.
and she wasn't sure of how to bring us up because we were living in a neighborhood which was completely different from the culture that she had grown up in. She left during the war. She was the only survivor. Her family, unfortunately, was lost during World War II.
Hmm.
So, no, my mother just brought us up. I went to Hebrew school. I learned the Hebrew language when I was about 10 or 11 years old. That was my first foreign language. I learned the prayers, and my mother gave us also lessons in African history,
Hmm.
and the she wanted us to have the full scope. She was just a very open-minded individual. She wasn't in any particular spiritual tradition, but she did grow up in the Jewish tradition, and we did celebrate the holidays, and we did things like that. So my mother was really an artist. She was a painter, and she did different types of artwork. But no, there was no talk of transcendence or anything like that. In
Hmm.
fact, I'm the only person in my family that has this great leaning toward the East,
Hmm.
and who had the I was probably the most introverted child in the family, and I was the one that didn't identify with the American culture. My siblings are more in the mainstream of the American way of life,
Hmm.
and they're all in different avenues of business and this and that. But I was the only one that diverged from that path and that left the family at a very young age. I left America, and I only came back to visit after that.
And it's great that your mother had that, gave you that space and that latitude to, in other words, not be ensconced in a particular dogma or a particular set of instructions on how to human and how to be. So that maybe gave you the opportunity. Because I talk to people sometimes who break out of homes that were very fundamentalist. Pick your religion, but they were fundamentalists, and they were sort of, this was a story of escape or just extraction, and then
No,
maybe
mine definitely
reflection.
wasn't. No,
Yeah,
no,
no. That's
no.
great, and I think that's great
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
had that space,
yeah,
and your mother, bless her
yeah,
heart, did
definitely.
that. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, and moving into the latter formative years, and you were at university, and you studied. Whoop, got a little echo popping in. And you were studying philosophy. What impact did Western academically applied philosophy have on you as you were getting ready to embark to the UK and then make that trajectory shifted? Can we talk about your school life and how philosophy may have left an impression on you?
Well, to tell the truth, I was disappointed with the way they taught philosophy, even at New York University. I felt, especially my ethics class, it was more like it was taken so lightly. It was as if the questions didn't really matter. They
Mm,
were just an academic. It was something they had to do, something they had to teach. But I didn't feel it was really seriously a serious conversation. And the only class that I really loved was my class on Neoplatonism,
mm,
because this was the one professor that was totally immersed in the subject. And you could tell that it meant so much to him. And he actually, the ideas were like, that was his persona, the Neoplatonist ideas. It filled him, it filled his heart, it filled his mind. And he was so inspirational. And that was the one class that I enjoyed in my career as a philosophy student. And I really respected him a lot because I knew that it wasn't just something he had to do. It was something that was meant the world to him. And he tried to convey that excitement to us as well. And because of that, I ended up really loving the study of Plotinus. And I felt that this this was really the truth that I felt I was looking for. I felt that his description of the one and the absolute and the good and the absolute beauty which we had to move toward in order to even appreciate the lesser forms of beauty. It was actually the absolute beauty that we were striving for. Naturally, the human being has to strive for the ultimate, and the ultimate was within us, but it was something that we had just moved away from, and we are coming back to who we really were. So I felt that the study of Plotinus was extremely invigorating, and it was something that I enjoyed tremendously.
Mhm.
And even the works of Plotinus were written in a very lyrical and beautiful way, and they
Okay.
really resonated with my own feelings. My intuitive feeling about life was very similar, and yeah.
Hmm.
I didn't know it was actually very similar to the Vedantic view of life. But at that time, Plotinus was one of my favorite philosophers.
Okay. Okay. And when we had our pre-meet, I'll share this with the audience that I was one of the things that just, got me turned my lights on and got me excited was that you kind of to me represent the I'll start with something kind of vague like the union of heart and mind, which we could use as a metaphor for West meets East, mind and heart. And I maybe ask you to explore that with me, but that there is a synthesis project to me historically in the human narrative, the human history, or whatever you want to call it, where East and West, when they weave their threads together, can produce beautiful tapestries. So, to your story, having gone from the West to the East, let's start with the provenance of that journey. I think from London or from the UK to getting to the East. There's some interesting notes there, perhaps, that we could talk about, and then also to on the on a greater scale, again, the idea of a Westerner rather going East and falling in love uh, with what's theirs. It's hopefully I'm setting that up nicely for you.
Well, I went, I did study comparative religion. Even while I was in New York, I made several visits to the Theosophical Society,
Mm,
and that's when I began to read the literature of comparative religion. And I began to understand some of the concepts which were spoken about in terms of karma, in terms of reincarnation, in terms of the jiva, the soul, and the aim of human life. And so I was introduced to the Eastern way of thought through the Theosophical Society in New York City while I was still a student. And I did feel a leaning in that direction, but it wasn't until I went to London and my first trip to India was was taken several years later. I was actually in a competition in New York in Washington D.C. After I had started meditating, I went back to America after I became a teacher of meditation, and I was studying at Mahashi's University in Iowa. I was getting my master's degree in curriculum development. And while I was there, I learned the advanced program, the TM City, SIDHI, which means perfection. It perfects the coordination between the mind and the body. And one of the practices we learn in the advanced program after learning to meditate is we learn yogic flying, or we learn levitation. And I did learn this technique, and there was a competition, the first yogic flying competition, which I was a participant in. And I was one of the winners in the competition.
mm,
And the winners got the free trip to India to be with Maharshi. And so that was my first trip to India as a participant in the International Yogic Flying Competition in Indira Gandhi in New Delhi. And that was my first experience of India as in this way. It was actually a gift from my guru
Mm.
to the participants in this competition. And the first time I set foot in India, I just felt I just finally found my home. There's no way of explaining it. I just felt that I had not felt completely at home in England either. I felt better than I did in America, but I also felt it wasn't my true home. And I didn't know until I set foot in India that I had found what I was really looking for. And it was an unspoken feeling. It was something that just resonated with the depth of my being. And I'm the only one in my family that feels this way. And, I can't explain it. It was just a resonance that I felt. It was like I was coming back home. And the Vedic culture as a whole is something which is very dear to my heart. And it's something which automatically I felt aligned to it. I felt the kinship with this way of understanding reality, as if it had already been ingrained in me, and I was just remembering the truth of what was already there. So I won't try to explain that, but if anyone has had that experience of knowing something beforehand and just having it reawakened within us. And even Plato speaks about remembering,
Mm.
remembering the ultimate, remembering the one, remembering who we really are. It's not like it's something from that's new. It's something that we've forgotten. We've forgotten who we really are. And when we come out of the cave of ignorance, we remember that this was our real nature, and this is who we really are, and this is the knowledge which is ingrained within us. It's just that it's been covered over or it's been shadowed. And that's how I feel with the understanding of the Vedic knowledge, that it's ingrained within, but it's just been clouded over by forgetting and by being so immersed in the relative world. And that's why most people aren't aware of it, because they're so immersed in the material world. They've forgotten the spiritual aspect of life.
And I was pondering a question when you were saying that, and then you kind of confirmed that in that last statement that you made, that the West seems to be maybe under an amnesia of sorts, by way of consumerism or distractions
Yeah.
of what we do in the West, and so that remembrance or the recall to bring us back to more um, perhaps the spiritual nature of ourselves versus the persona nature of ourselves. So that's important. And so, but it's being spoken about in Vedanta and the teachings, and so I think it's a universal human struggle to have that sort of moment in life where we have the awareness or the revelation that, oh, okay, I am a sort of profile of myself or a persona of myself, and how do I move back into what may be a more authentic expression of myself? And that's some of the work that you've been able to move through and understand, as to how to, as Plato said, to either discover or rediscover that truer nature
Yes,
of
well,
ourselves.
that's what meditation does actually, and
Hmm.
because transcendental meditation, first of all, it comes from one of the most ancient traditions of knowledge in the world, the Vedic tradition of knowledge. This meditation comes from the Adi Shankara tradition, which is more than 5,000 years old, and it's not something that was just cooked up in the 20th century, or
Hmm.
someone just got it from a book and they opened it and they found this technique. It's something that's been passed down through an oral tradition from from teacher to student, teacher to student, teacher to student, and this knowledge is authentic, and it's a completely easy, natural, simple, and effortless technique, a mental technique which anyone can practice from any walk of life. And it doesn't involve any belief. You don't even have to believe in it in order for it to work. It's a scientific technique which allows the mind to experience quieter and quieter and quieter levels of the thinking process until we transcend thought completely and experience the state of unbounded awareness, the state of pure consciousness, which Maharishi has also called the simplest state of human awareness. It's a state of least excitation of consciousness. And this is a state of perfect order. It's a state of infinite freedom. It's a state of perfect balance. It's a state in which the home of all the laws of nature that govern the entire universe are lively in that state. It's a state of eternal bliss, Satchit Ananda. It's a state of pure consciousness. So this state can be easily accessed by anyone because in the Transcendental Meditation technique, we only use the natural tendency of the mind to move in the direction of more and more happiness, more and more creativity, more and more intelligence, more and more power. And actually, the quietest, most simplest state of human awareness is a state of infinite creativity. It's a state of pure intelligence. It's a state which is a state of infinite freedom from all limitations, from all boundaries. It's a state of bliss. And because of that, the mind naturally takes the direction toward pure consciousness. All that is needed is for to have a vehicle which turns the attention inward, because the mind is so used to directing the attention outward through the five senses. We've become habituated to looking outside for everything, for happiness, for fulfillment, for everything. And so we need a vehicle which turns the attention inward. And in the Transcendental Meditation technique, the vehicle is the mantra. The mantra comes from the Vedic tradition of knowledge. It's a mantra which is suitable for the individual, and you learn the selection of the mantras when you become a teacher of Transcendental Meditation. And the mantra, excuse me, just allows the attention to go to turn inward. And then the dive toward the pure consciousness is automatic. It happens spontaneously without any effort. So that's why the technique can be practiced by anyone. We teach children from the age of 10 years old to meditate. And we even taught the oldest man in the United States a few decades ago. I think he was over 100 years old and he learned to meditate. So it's a very easy and effortless technique. And that's what's different from most techniques that are available today, involve concentration or contemplation. And Transcendental Meditation doesn't involve either one of those two things, not contemplation or concentration. It's completely effortless. And it has more scientific research backing up the benefits of this practice than any other technique in the world.
If I were to imagine there was an audience member watching this interview right now who may be a young person and they may be like you, introverted, and maybe feeling a bit tortured by the what I, from my observation, is a crazy frenetic world now that we have a lot of internet and social media and things like that. What advice, and we can bring TM into this, but I want more of a personal, maybe sage advice, maybe for what would you say to a young person who may be a blank slate and may not, as you may have been in your teenage years, or what advice or counsel would you give to a younger person who is seeking to align themselves, maybe geographically, but mostly in a sense of directional alignment, mind spirit kind of ways of feeling more fitted to the world? Would you have some advice for somebody like that, a younger person?
Well, I think if they're searching for the answers to questions which are more than just an individual situation, but something on a larger scale, it's there are many different branches of literature which can help to broaden one's consciousness. I was, as I said, I was actually a voracious reader when I was in my teen years. I read Dostoevsky, I read Tolstoy, I read Dreiser, I read all the big novels, and sometimes by reading literature that can broaden one's awareness, and then that can, and also if you read books which are more in the spiritual vein, like Rumi or Gibran, or some of the other Emerson, or Thoreau, who was a transcendentalist in his thinking, or if you read some of the biographies of the greatest artists, if you're interested in art, or even read the biography of Einstein, or
Mm,
read some books which have meaning to you in your particular field of interest.
mm-hmm.
If it's poetry, if it's science, if it's art, if it's in your field of interest, find people who are more on an elevated level of awareness and read books by them. So don't spend too much time on the social media, which is just a drain, really, but spend time researching what really interests you, and listen to your own inner voice, and be guided by what makes you really happy as an individual, not what other people are doing, but what makes you happy as an individual. And even if it's a path that diverges from the crowd, that doesn't mean it's a lesser path or anything. Just follow your inner voice. But in order to hear your inner voice, you must spend some time alone, and some time in a more silent atmosphere, in nature, or in 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 a place where you can really reflect on what you really want and the direction of your individual life, because everyone on this planet is unique. There are no two people that are the same. Even two twins are unique in their own path, and we have to listen to our inner voice. That's what I did. I simply followed the guidance of my inner voice, and my mother did encourage me. My mother did encourage me to follow my inner voice as a child. She
Mm-hmm.
felt that whatever I wanted, I would know what is best for me. And I didn't have to always ask her. She said, "You can find this out. You will know what's right for you." And that really helped me a lot, because I felt that in my entire life. I followed what I felt was right for me. And it took me to foreign places, and it took me away from my family. But that was the path that was right for me. And it was the path that gave me the greatest happiness in my life.
Along similar lines, if there's an audience member that's thinking of maybe not just the United States, but anywhere in the West, and what practical advice would you give to someone who wants to experience the expat life? What would you say, that lessons that you learned? And it sounds like psycho-emotionally, psycho-spiritually, it was an easy transition for you, that you felt at home when you arrived there. But just maybe a couple of practical ideas, and we can move on if you're like, no, I don't, but if there's something you want to share that might help somebody who's thinking they're at that stage of their life, to say, I want to go be somewhere where I feel more at home, in wherever that is.
I would say just get a ticket and go. I mean, my place was completely different. I won't say it was easy. It wasn't easy.
Mm-hmm.
When I came to India and I decided that I was going to stay here, I shipped all my belongings from England to India. And the years that I traveled in India, it was not at all easy. I had extremely challenging time. And I won't go into the details, but
Okay.
it was a very challenging time. And I would say, if you want to travel to Europe, or if you want to travel to any other country, just go for a few weeks and see how you like it. Try it first. I went to India 3 times before I shifted my life to India. I came to India, to study sitar, to study music. I came to study Sanskrit. I had my first trip to India, as I mentioned, as a participant in the yogic flying. So I had 3 or 4 trips to India before I actually moved here. and I was able to really sense whether I really wanted to be here. So I would say if you really want to move away from America, then just decide which country you want to go to, and if it's easy to get the visa, and just go there for a month or go there for a few weeks and see how it feels, and see if you feel like it's a better choice. But one just has to follow one's inclination on that end, and be courageous about it.
Yeah, I think that's important. And part of my motive in asking that is, and I think about it too, is we idealize that escape and we idealize the change. And so for you to say that, it could be fraught with challenges, and I don't mean fraught in a heavy way, but just it's not going to be that. So in other words, in modernity, we have people on social media, YouTube, and they're the so-called influencers, and oh, life is fabulous in Bali, and life is fabulous in Thailand or wherever, and it's like, well, hold on, yeah, I appreciate that it can be fabulous, but thank you for saying that, because again, if somebody in their heart truly wishes to rehouse themselves, and I mean house in a new environment, that you have to be prepared to to go through the process, and that may not always be so romantic and idealized. So thank you for that. I appreciate that share, because I think again, you've got a life of experience that we can pull out of you and share with others for their benefit, and that's wonderful. So direction wise, I would like to turn to let's see, I'm trying to remember if I had any other questions relating to what we've been talking about before I do that. I don't think so. And if I do, I'll put it back in. But Pilgrimage on the Path of Love was a book that you wrote. And I was wondering if we could spend some time on that before we conclude our conversation. If you could tell us about that book, and perhaps how there may be some Barbara Ann Briggs in that book.
Yeah, this is the book
Beautiful cover.
that I wrote in the Himalayas. Yeah, I chose this cover.
It's
Luckily, the
very nice.
publisher accepted it. So, Pilgrimage on the Path of Love is a story of a woman who travels alone to India in search of fulfillment. And after many challenges and soul-stirring experiences, she emerges triumphant with a much deeper understanding of her purpose in life and the meaning of true love. So this book was written in the Himalayas. It was written as I traveled up to the Himalayas, from Delhi to Manali and later up to Ladakh. And it was written in the forests in Manali. I used to go to the forests in the Himalayas and sit as the sun poured its radiance through the trees. I used to sit there with my notebook. This book is really the expression of my soul, the expression of my inner being, my love for India, and all the things that I learned as I moved through India. I made it into a novel. It was inspired by actual experiences I was having as I traveled. So if you want to get the flavor of India and the flavor of what it was like for a woman to be alone traveling up to the Himalayas and also up to Ladakh, and some of the different experiences that one has in India, and the people which I met from all different cultures as I traveled, and it weaves a tale out of this journey. It's a spiritual journey, and it also gives the feeling of how the East and the West come together into a wholeness, which is more than just the East, which is, as Mr. McSweeney mentioned, the East is mainly the value of the heart, and the West is more the value of the intellect. And in the persona of the main character, Shantila, we see that blending of both East and West. Even though she's born in the West, her natural inclination is to move toward the East. And her feeling is to be in the Eastern culture. And she's meditating in the book, and I share some of the experiences of meditation. And it also has it gives the experience of, like, what's the difference between spiritual wealth and material wealth. And it also gives the idea of the difference between human love and divine love. And it also gives the some of the different aspects of Tibetan Buddhism, which I had no awareness of whatsoever, but which was somehow that experience was thrust upon me as I moved up to the Himalayas, and as I was with lamas whom I became friends with in the guest house where I stayed in New Delhi. So that's when I had the invitation to go to Ladakh. I'd never even heard of Ladakh. I didn't even know where it was or anything. But somehow that invitation was extended to me from a family that lived in Ladakh. And I ended up traveling to the highest place in the world. And I actually worshipped at the highest temple in the world on the one of the paths
Mm,
toward the Nubra Valley, which was just open to foreigners just before I arrived. So
okay.
it was very high in the Himalayas. So Shantila just represents that unity that can be gained, and that ability to accept people from all different cultures, and to embrace people from all different cultures, and to understand the beauty of every culture, which is like different facets of a diamond. And the beauty of the whole diamond is because of all the different facets in it. And this is the beauty of our own world. It's composed of so many differences, but when they come together in harmony, you have something very beautiful which is created out of that. So I give these feelings, and these thoughts are expressed in the book, and I I would like to share it with as many people as possible. And I I could read some of it to you if you'd like me to read a passage or something from the book.
Yes,
Or
if
do
there's
you would
no, if
I
there's
don't know if
something.
there's
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting
okay.
you. Go ahead and finish your thought.
Okay. No, would you like me to read something?
Yes, I would. I think if there's something that resonates with you, either relative to this conversation or anything,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yeah.
by all means.
Well, I'll read this section, which is relevant. And okay. In that moment of truth, I realize that so many times we look outside, searching for a perfection which already exists inside all the time. We search for the perfect companion, the perfect piece of music, the perfect cloth to wear, the perfect house, the perfect meal. But the perfection is already everywhere. Omnipresent, it evades our gaze. Like the musk deer who carries the most heavenly fragrance within itself, who wanders in search of that divine fragrance, covering countless miles of hills and forests, roaming far and wide, until it finds that the fragrance is created by itself. Like that deer are we, in search of the fulfillment which will never wane, and which exists eternally deep within our own heart. But where can we find it? Unseen is that, unmeasured by time or space, unheard except in silence, undigested except when cooked by the inner fire deep within the temple of the heart.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. That was beautiful. I really appreciate that. I don't know if you noticed my cat's in the background. She's pretty zen
Yeah.
right now. So picking up on the vibe of the conversation. No, no, that was beautiful. Thank you very much for sharing that. And that just anchors this conversation to me more deeply in the human endeavor to, as you said, go within and turn the awareness inward. And speaking uh, to what you just read, I think that really ties in well. So thank you very much. Now, I'd like to ask. I've had a number of authors on in my series, and have people come up to you or written you or emailed and mentioned how they've been impacted by your writing or the book uh, that we're talking about right now? Have you
Well,
gotten
I've
any
gotten some
feedback?
very, I have some reviews. I've gotten some very nice reviews
Mm.
from people who read the book. Some people, one lady from Goodreads said she definitely thought it was one of the best books she'd ever read.
Oh,
And she actually traveled with me. She looked up every single place that I went in the book, and
okay.
she felt like she was traveling with me on the journey. So, and I had a very good review from a writer in New Delhi who said that my book was like a breath of fresh air. And she'd read many books on spirituality, but she felt like my book was really a breath of fresh air, something different. So I have quite a few reviews now, and the people who have really enjoyed it, they have written reviews and said that they have. And one reviewer actually, from the reader's favorite review, he said, excuse me, Pilgrimage on the Path of Love is a portal to an artfully detailed world of beauty, love, and awareness. I call it a portal because it felt like I stepped into one from the moment I picked up the book. And then later he says, Barbara Ann Briggs writes for the free spirits, adventure enthusiasts, and wisdom and spiritual depth seekers. The audience is encouraged to love and embrace others, regardless of their religious beliefs. And this core message is key to achieving world peace. I recommend it to the world. So I was very happy with that review. And you never know what people are going to say about your book. And I never, when I wrote it, I didn't feel it was, I was writing it for world peace, but this is what this reviewer felt. And I was very happy with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, the reverberance of ideas and information, if I could be so cold with a book or with somebody's heart poured into a book. But that to me, I'm a kind of imaginary guy, and it's like the reverberance of what you've done with that book, radiating out into the world, into, again, I use the term psychosocial domain where we interact with each other, is as you say, as it relates to world peace or people finding an inner peace that then can again reverberate out into us being more pro-social and empathetic and compassionate. That book is a vehicle for that. And I want to imagine that someday you will get an email or a letter from somebody and that the impact in their lives would be significant. I want that for every well-written book, for every spiritual or otherwise, just even a self-help book that somebody can have that turnaround moment. So, and I know that's happening. So, and again, the reviews speak to that. So thank you for sharing that. And to the YouTube audience, I will have links to Barbara's website as well as to the literature, to the book that she has. And would it be good to let the audience know that there's something in the pipeline too, that you've written something,
Yeah.
manuscript perhaps, or perhaps a finished draft, and we will have a little time before it becomes available. But do you want to share some insights on that?
Well, I do have one other book that was published. My
Okay.
first book was on the teachings of my guru, and it was called The Contribution of Mahashi's Vedic Science to Complete Fulfillment in Life. And
Okay.
that is a book of 16 chapters, and it has over 100 quotations by Mahashi. It's available. It was printed as a book. It was published in New Delhi actually,
Hmm.
and it was now it's available on Kindle as an ebook. So if you wanted to get it, we'll put the information. It says over 100 quotations by Maharshi, and it
Okay.
explains the Vedic knowledge in great depth. It explains Maharshi's contribution in great depth, and it goes into the explanation of the Transcendental Meditation technique and its advanced programs and Vedic education, Vedic civilization, etc. My new book is called The Secret of Creative Abundance, Alignment with Our Spiritual Nature. And I've just completed that book. I'm actually in the process of searching for a publishing agent. And that book has 9 chapters, and it goes into the relevance of transcendence, or the experience of pure consciousness, to the greatest scientific discoveries and the greatest artistic creations. How all the scientists actually were experiencing moments of transcendence before their greatest discoveries, and they were having this awareness of being inspired by some level of life which was transcendental. And they spoke about it, and actually Schrodinger and Bohr and some of the most notable Nobel laureates in the field of quantum field theory spoke about how Vedanta influenced their discoveries of quantum field theory. They had read the Vedantic text, and this led them to their understanding of quantum field theory and the formulation of it. And I speak about how the greatest artists also spoke about the being of nothingness. Leonardo da Vinci spoke about the being of nothingness as the most significant being in the universe. And that's like the value of pure consciousness, that value of the transcendent. And most of the greatest artists, Victor Hugo spoke about the silence which was necessary in order to be inspired by the muse, which was the divine muse, which led him to his greatest literature. So many great poets and artists have spoken about those moments of transcendence. So this is the book that I've just completed, and it will. Hopefully, I pray that it'll be available by the end of the year. I can find the agent if it can be published, and that book is also on my website. And if you subscribe to the website, then you'll be notified as soon as the book is published. So be sure to subscribe to my email,
Yes.
to my email list.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, that'll be down in the description field. I'll make sure I have means to discover more of your work and stay, again, current, as you just said, with any information that comes out. It's kind of a cheesy question, but I ask it of a lot of people who are on a path of doing the kind of work that you're doing, or helping others. What do you, and it's non-committal, but I mean, what in your imagination, what in your vision for a future other than this book that you're in the process of getting published, what would you aspire to for your future, for your relationship with your fellow persons in the world? Is there anything that you use, that you dance in the imaginal to say, oh, wouldn't it be neat if I could do this? So you can be frivolous here and free, yeah, if you want.
I presently have a YouTube channel called Living Wisdom, Barbara Briggs, and I have a podcast as well.
Okay.
So I hope to develop my my YouTube channel to get many more subscribers who are regularly listening to my videos. And I have a podcast as well, which is two new episodes every month.
Okay.
And I am working on my memoir, The Empowering Story of My Life in India. And I will go through all the unbelievable experiences that I had when I first moved to India permanently. And I said they were very challenging. And if you read my memoir, you'll understand why I'm saying they were very challenging.
Yeah.
And
oh my gosh.
And I have another book which is in the pipeline, my fifth book, which started, but I know the title of it. And I hope to complete 5 books, and I hope to give more knowledge out in terms of speaking more and having more chances to interact with the public as a TM teacher and also as a consciousness advisor. I've been qualified as a consciousness advisor.
Okay.
And as well as I was a TM teacher for many years. I just got qualified as a consciousness advisor. And I will be giving more talks and more, there'll be more interaction with the public in the years to come.
Okay. I'll need to get the link to your YouTube channel and wherever your podcasts, the platforms that have your podcast, so that we can have that down in the description as well. Let me ask, as I am a so-called content producer on YouTube, who seeks out guests and so forth. So this is a personal kind of curiosity. Who are you looking to be in conversation with in your podcast and your YouTube channel? What kind of thinkers?
Well, my podcasts, I usually just give the talks. They aren't very
Okay.
long. They're about 10.
Okay.
I'm not really looking for people, but on my videos, I've made over 100, I think, and
Oh,
mainly I've given them on my own, but I would like to interview people. I haven't
yeah.
interviewed anyone yet. And of course, if I was interviewing people, I would like them to be in the spiritual field, or
Okay.
at least in the field of knowledge
Okay.
that relate to consciousness.
Okay.
So there is a doctor that wants to be on my YouTube, in, to be interviewed on my YouTube channel, as an Ayurvedic doctor in America. It's a lady, an Indian lady, and I'm open to interviews. I haven't had many interviews. I haven't had any interviews on my YouTube channel yet,
Okay.
but I would like to go into that field. And of course, people who are interested in consciousness in some way or other, either health wise or in any other way
Hmm.
as a practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Part of my motive in asking that is this conversation is going to be on YouTube and it's going to have a life of its own, and who knows who's going to discover it, and there may be somebody interesting that could reach out to you. So perhaps I will say this, that I am going to say this, that if there's somebody, um, as Barbara just described, who can be a good guest and bring some value in a dialogue with Barbara. If you don't mind my saying, Barbara, that maybe they can reach out to you and you can
That's fine.
see if there's a good fit there. So anyway, I just say that because again, I have to get in the 3 or so years that I've been doing this, I've had to get creative in finding guests. And if you're driven to that, if you're feeling drawn to that, this might be an opportunity for those folks that are listening. If you think you can lend something to Barbara's project and the work that she does. So what I would like to do now is, I think I've run through the questions that I wanted to make sure we covered here. But let me offer you the opportunity to talk about anything that we may not have covered here, or something that you feel that would be of value for the audience to share, or something that's in your heart right now that you want to share. But maybe we can wrap up with something that might speak to you or is asking to come out of you. Sorry, I'm not giving you much of a
No,
lead here, but just something that you want to share that we didn't cover.
well, the only thing that I'd like to share is that um, many people don't realize that the individual is cosmic. I mean, we really carry within us the untapped potential to experience the farthest reaches of the universe. But most people are confined to the small limitations of their individual situation or their individual life. But I feel that the aim of human life is really to broaden our awareness, to expand our awareness. And the experience of pure consciousness is an experience of the self, the experience of who we really are. And when we have that experience, we lay the foundation for the growth of higher states of consciousness, for the full expansion of human awareness. Enlightenment, that state in which life is lived in total harmony with all the laws of nature. And when I say in harmony with all the laws of nature, I mean in the state of enlightenment, we are living in full harmony and complete attunement with the will of God. That means everything we do radiates goodness, harmony, love, peace, and joy into the universe. And this is what the universe needs more than anything else. It needs happy, fulfilled, healthy, peaceful individuals, because the individual is the unit of the world. And the only way we can create a peaceful world is by creating peace and happiness and harmony and fulfillment within the individuals in the world. So I just want to say that the greatest contribution that anyone can make is to be happy and radiate happiness into the universe. And a way to do this is to find the source of happiness within ourselves, at the deepest level of our own awareness, is an ocean of infinite bliss. And if you don't go in that direction, if the awareness is always directed outward, then we miss that ocean of happiness deep within ourselves. And it's so easy to get there. It's a pathless path. You're not going anywhere because it's within you. and it's easy to experience. So that's what I wanted to say: experience who we really are, and take the path, the pathless path to higher consciousness, and experience what fulfillment really is. And there's no reason to be unhappy. Don't let the stress of the world weigh you down, but take that direction to happiness and move toward what you really desire to achieve in this world. That's what I wanted to
That
say.
was so beautiful and well put. And it's funny because when you started speaking, I was thinking, okay, one last thing I want to do, and I was going to ask you to do a blessing or a mantra to send us out, but you just did that. So no, I'm not going to ask that. But thank you. No, that was absolutely beautiful, and I hope that connects. And again, all I ever ask of these conversations is that somebody out there is positively impacted by this, much like your book. All I ever ask of a well-written book that's meant to help others in the human project is that it has that one spark. And we could ask for many sparks, but I'd be humble and start with one spark. And Barbara, here's to our having created something that will move out into the world and in a life of its own, and create a few sparks. And I really appreciate your coming here and having a conversation with me. I'm in gratitude to you for that. And again, I only aspire that what we created here will have that effect. And the work that you've done throughout your whole life has brought us, to be able to do this. So thank you. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. It was my great pleasure. It was really very enjoyable to speak to you, and I was very happy to be able to share some of my work with your audience.
Mm.
So I'm very grateful for the invitation.
Well, it fulfilled what I thought would happen. When we talked in our pre-meet, I was like, oh boy, So, and what I'd also like to do is invite you while we're on with an audience to come back when your forthcoming book is published. Maybe I can get a review copy. I can be informed by it, and then we could have another conversation down the road. So let's
Yeah,
put that out there as an
let me know.
intention. Okay, wonderful.
Okay.
All right, Barbara, I will say goodbye to you after we're done recording. To the YouTube audience, thank you guys so much for being here in attendance and observing the conversation or listening to the conversation. I appreciate that. And as I said, Barbara, I will say goodbye to you in a moment. And again, thank you, YouTube audience. You guys take care.